It is my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. So Dr. Martha Somerman serves as the director for the National Institute of Dental and Craniofacial Research at the NIH. And also, she's also the chief of the Laboratory of Oral Connective Tissue Biology at the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Disease. For those of you who were probably wondering why her own lab is not within NIDCR, because NIH has a policy that the director's lab cannot be in the same institute, and I'm sure she will share that with you a little later. And as an internationally known researcher and educator, as Provost Quick has shared with you, before NIDCR, Dr. Somerman was the dean at University of Washington in Seattle. Her research has focused on defining the key regulator controlling development, maintenance, and regeneration of dental, oral, and craniofacial tissues. Under her leadership, the NIDCR has just completed a new strategic plan, NIDCR 2030, which articulates 4 goals: supporting excellent science, embracing the value of precise and personalized oral health, reducing oral health disparities, and ensuring a strong and diverse workforce for the future. These goals and their supporting objectives will guide the NIDCR decision-making for the next 6 years towards achieving a balanced research portfolio that improves the nation's dental, oral, and craniofacial health. So Dr. Somerman has been the recipient of numerous awards and then has traveled all over the world to give lectures. And then just a couple weeks ago at the ADR meeting in Florida, she received the 2018 International American Association for Dental Research Distinguished Scientist Award for Basic Science in Biological Mineralization. Congratulations. And then please join me in welcoming Dr. Somerman.
When I have how much time left or something? Because I could...
Like maybe 3 minutes?
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. Because yeah, and I'm short, so I have to do like that. I have the slides over there. We'll figure this out. Okay. Well, it's really very much a pleasure and an honor, actually, for me, and I feel humbled for you to be inviting me. One of the things you may or may not know about Dr. Yang Chai is that one of the reasons I said yes is because you can't say no, because he's been an incredible leader for NIDCR. You ask him to do anything, and I think on Thursday you're actually doing something for us as well. And so it's every day he's saying something and doing something. And I also would like to thank the Dean for your leadership here and all the things that I'm seeing. Dr. Chai took me around this morning, and I've had a great time, and so I think I'm staying here, so I don't know. You want to switch places, we could do that. And especially I thank the students. One is for joining me. It's an incredible show of all of you being here. And I know not all of you, I imagine not everybody in this audience is going into an academic role, but have had a wonderful experience as researchers. And I've tried to orient this to the students to get you to be lifelong excited about research. And so that's what it's about. It's about the students. It's about you in practice. I was a dean, and I know the key responsibility is to train the best dentists for the community, as that's number one. So I recognize that, and I congratulate you. So who's in the 4th year? So not many 4th year. 3rd year? Go 3rd year. 2nd year? 1st year? All right, so, nah, and the rest of you are just here. Okay. All right. So one of the interesting things that Yang mentioned is that IC Director's lab happened to be at another place because they don't trust us. Because I ultimately hold the budget money, and I would put all the lab, I mean, you could see that I would do that. I'd put all the money, all the budget would go into my lab. if it was at NIDCR. So that's why I have to be elsewhere. So that's the story there. Also, as I go through this talk, if you want any specific articles, I'm glad to provide them. But I don't call out any individual principal investigators or researchers because, in fact, it's all of my extramural and intramural investigators that are incredible, and I'm afraid I'd leave somebody else out if I mention one and not another. So for me, one of the passions that I have is to engage all communities. And so can you imagine, this isn't reality, but can you imagine if it was a seamless approach where you had the researchers, the educators, and the clinical practice going back and forth and talking with each other? We need practitioners. We need the practitioners talking to us. They see patients every day. They know what research needs to be done. They may think about it differently, but we need that communication. And also, frequently we'll target things at clinical practice, like the opioid crisis. We need to get it back into the education side. So we need us all working together. So as you go through this presentation today and thinking about this, I'd welcome your advice on how to communicate better with the clinicians, because we need your input. I think at the end of the day, sometimes as a clinical person, at the end of the day, I know on a practice day, I'm really exhausted. And yeah, I saw an interesting case, but I just don't have the almost energy to find out where to go to talk about that case in terms of the research side. So I'd like your input on that. So let me give you an example. This happened when I was at the University of Washington. I had a wonderful, we have wonderful volunteer dentists that come in to train you in the clinics, but also to give continuing education courses over lunch. And so Gary Hayamoto was presenting that afternoon. And yeah, yeah, because I have to see the slides. I could hold this. Maybe I just hold it. It's a real pain. Maybe I'll figure this out. So. Then you can't see me if I talk like this. Can you hear in the back now? Yeah, so. Maybe that works better. Okay, how's that? Good back there? Okay. So anyway, this wonderful dentist was coming in to give CE course, and guess what happened? The pizza hadn't arrived for the students yet, so they hadn't. So they weren't in the room. He called me over. He said, "I have this really puzzling case. I don't know what to do about it." And he was as being an excellent clinician. He had followed this case. So this was a young boy that was hit by a baseball bat, fractured his jaw, also cracked his tooth. As you can see, you may think as a clinician, I better get that tooth out right now because it's going to cause a problem. It was asymptomatic. He followed this young man, this boy, to a young man, and you could see it healed. And he said, I can't figure out, when you fracture a tooth, everybody knows it doesn't heal. So what happened? And he was showing me this next figure. And as you can see here, it's like breaking a bone. So here's the permanent tooth coming in, and there's fluid bathing that tooth. And probably that fluid, just like when you break a bone, is what corrected that crack. Because of the pizza moment, because the students hadn't come in, I ended up writing a grant proposal that was funded by NIDCR to try to figure out what is in that media, that milieu, that would promote regeneration. So this is what happened by pure accident. And he was waiting almost for somebody to come in. So next time you have a CE guy, wait outside and have the dean come in, and then they'll get some more research going. So here are the different areas I'm going to be discussing. And for those of you who are not familiar with NIH, I just wanted to mention that most of our funding, about 80% of our funding of NIH, goes to the extramural community. The same for NIDCR. There are 27 institutes and centers. We are a research engine, but we're also an economic engine because we fund a lot of researchers and their labs, and that supports us as well. So when you go out to practice and you're involved with advocating, remind Congress that we also are an economic engine. We also have a very strong intramural program. That's the largest brick building in the country is the clinical center. There are 23 institutes that have intramural programs. NIDCR enjoys an intramural program. One of the areas since I've joined, which is about 6 years ago, is to increase the focus on the clinical center. It's an unbelievable area for undiagnosed and rare diseases. When you're out in practice, or even when you're seeing patients here, if you have a family and you don't know what's going on and it looks like some unique type of disease, those are ones that we'd be very interested in collaborations, and also as faculty, very interested in collaborations in this area. So please think about this. And then I put this slide here as one that maybe many of you think about as you're going into practice. It's an important thing to talk to your patients about in terms of being excited about different areas and why is it interesting. It's good when you talk to Congress. So I think you know, so there are 4 mineralized tissues in the oral cavity: bone, cementum, dentin, and enamel. One is epithelial, the other is mesenchymal. Also, enamel is the hardest tissue in your body. It's been used to try to understand other types of tissues and also for designing and construction of why is this enamel so hard. Also, the average human produces about 96 gallons of saliva each year. And I was recently with a group of patients that have salivary gland problems for a variety of reasons. And the way they described how it feels, it was perfect. I ground glass in their mouths. So this is a really significant thing, and it's great that we have saliva, but can you imagine if you don't? And that's one of the research areas that we're interested in. Another thing is there are more bacteria in the human mouth than there are people on Earth. That's pretty amazing. And in terms of the implications of the positive, the negative, it's a very important area. The importance costs a lot of money. It's expensive. The oral health is an integral part of overall health, and we're not there yet, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. Tooth decay is the 2nd most common disease, and head and neck cancers are the 7th most frequent around the world. And we've made a difference. We've made a difference in caries. We made a difference in dentulism. And in terms of our targeted research, we have provided evidence-based practice. So for your practices, the research that we do, sometimes you don't realize it, has really opened up the area for more evidence-based practice for you. And also the tools and technologies you use, you may not be aware of. Some of these were first started because of the funding through the NIDCR. We discussed a little bit about the strategic plan, and so maybe I'll move through this slide pretty quickly. But to mention, because I think a lot of students don't realize this, that we were the 3rd institute that was started on the NIH campus, and it was started in 1948. Does that ring a bell for you? Why was it started in 1948? A student? One student. Don't be afraid. Answer. All right. World War II. So what was recognized is that the men and women could not qualify for the military because of this severe epidemic. The epidemic was caries. They didn't understand what it was at the time, and it's because of the finding of the forming of the NIDCR that this found, and obviously it's been expanded. There used to be intramural programs, now it's mostly funded extramurally. And it's our 70th anniversary, so I just wanted to call out and cheer for NIDCR on our 70th anniversary, and we've done a lot. One of the wonderful things about our area, the dental, oral, craniofacial tissue areas, there are many diseases that we study. You can see here there are about 8 diseases that we really focus on, from caries to orofacial pain to periodontal disease, rare diseases. Our portfolio in rare diseases is about 13% of our portfolio. Because of all these diseases, there are many, many different disciplines, from tissue regeneration that you heard a little bit about, to neurosciences, to our practice-based network, which I'll end with at the end of this talk, to epidemiology. So there are many, many, many different areas of disciplines for opportunities for research in this area. And as I mentioned before, we're a economic engine. So we fund about 320 training career development, but there's 6,500 oral health researchers and we inform about 195,000 active dentists in practice. So one of the things we're very excited about, and I'm really fortunate to have a wonderful leader of the NIH, and that's Dr. Francis Collins. He's 24/7. He's out there every day. One is he's a phenomenal scientist himself, but he's also out there every day advocating for us, advocating for NIH, and he's optimistic. You know, I'll be on a sad day and you go into the room with Francis and he's just always excited and always believing that there are going to be great discoveries, and we do have a bipartisan Congress. So with that, the budget to NIH for 18 was about an 8.8% increase. There's some earmarked specific areas. Some of those earmarked areas fit us, but also to the individual ICs, it's been about 5%. So we went from a budget of 424 to 447. We are incredibly excited about this, and I hope you share the enthusiasm no matter where you are in terms of the NIH funding and the impact it's going to have on practice. For the faculty here, some of you wonder, what about my individual R01? It looks like there are a lot of initiatives. Some of these initiatives are not set aside. There are areas that we're just hoping that if there's an excitement out there, but it's still R01, it's principal investigator driven. About 81% of our money is funded because of your wonderful excitement in areas of interest. So how are you doing? You should be pretty proud of where you are and what you're doing in terms of the funding. So one is NIDCR funding to your university is $12.3 million. NIH funding to the whole university is $258 million. And if you look at it, $6.5 million goes to the School of Dentistry, where only $4 million of NIDCR's goes to the School of Dentistry. This is good. It means, just like in your finances, your portfolio should be diversified, and in fact, that's what you're doing. So this is really very good. So since I can't see there, I'm glad I brought this up here. So in terms of USC, I think we've already mentioned many of these. There's a lot of stuff that you're doing for us, and I thank you so much. From the regenerative medicine to the behavioral social research, mechanistic side, we fund a lot of that. Cancer, oral malignancies, genetics, genomics, craniofacial biology, immunity and inflammation, and we already mentioned, you already covered face-based, See Doctor, and also our training you have a training grant in craniofacial biology. So you've covered it all. You're great. What I wanted to mention, and this is maybe for faculty, but it's also an indication for all that we're very collaborative. So it's a very trans NIH. The IC directors talk with each other. We talk about areas that we could work together on. One is something called the NIH Common Fund. The microbiome project started from a common fund. NIDCR was the leader. It usually are funded for 5, then they'll do a continuation for 10 years, and then it's expected that the institutes pick up the funding. The other area right now that we are co-funding, co-directing, is the glycosciences. And so there are many activities here. There are opportunities for funding, so take a look at that. The pain area has grown and grown and grown, and I'll maybe mention it a little bit later, but obviously that you have heard that there's set aside monies related to the opioid crisis. So any of you that are doing research in pain, this is an important area. The Office of Scientific Workforce Diversity works with us, as does the Women's Health. And then there are many trans NIH relationships related to regenerative medicine. So one is Dr. C, but there are other areas of regenerative medicine, and one is related to the 21st century cures. And so here, there's set aside money in a variety of different areas. It's from Congress, but we have to ask for the monies every single year. So one was the Cancer Moonshot. I'm sure you've heard a lot about that. The other is the brain research through advancing innovation in neurotechnologies, or the BRAIN initiative. This is an area where we partner, and there are opportunities for research that will be funded through the NIDCR, as well as through something called the Blueprint. The All of Us program is one I'll mention in a second, but this is one that, well, I'll talk a little bit more about it later. And then another one is Regenerative Medicine Innovation Project, or RMIP, and I'll mention that in a second. Oh, so this wasn't even here, okay. So the 21st Century Cures Regenerative Medicine, the reason why I'm mentioning this, in addition to Dr. C, this is another initiative. It's mandated by Congress. They set aside monies related to this. Their research focus is on adult stem cells, so it's different. Ours is much broader in terms of the areas that we're considering funding. In 2017, there were call for proposals. This is really for the faculty to mention this to you. I can go into more detail, but there's a lot of other things I want to talk about. But I did want to mention in 2017 we had some. There were none that were funded in the dental field, none that were funded that were picked up by this 21st Century Cures. The reason they didn't even get to review, because the requirement is a one-to-one funding, and for whatever reason, the people that submitted the proposals didn't read the directions. So, 2018, so you have faculty have the same problem as students. We don't read directions. So this call for proposals should be out this month. So we're doing 2018. There's more money set aside for 2018. So it's 10 million plus 10 million that you have to have industry support or school support or in-kind support, one-to-one. And I'm actually thinking of using this model for other types of research areas that we propose as well. So please, if you're putting something in, read the directions beforehand. But this is an exciting opportunity for additional monies that does not come through NIDCR. It's a trans-NIH activity. So this is a trans activity. This is All of Us. This is one that Francis Collins is incredibly excited about. And his dream of personalized, individualized medicine based on getting lots of information. This is a million volunteers that we're hoping to have from very diverse backgrounds. And by understanding the genetics, the genomics, the environment, the nutrition, the lifestyle, being able to understand individuals, risks, population risks, and therefore improve the health of the communities by this initiative. It's right now in the beta phase. There's a lot of issues related to it, but there's a lot of excitement around it. And one is talking to the electronic health records, and I'll mention that a bit later. So I have already mentioned this, and there is going to be set aside monies in this area. So any of you that are involved in research in the pain field, please take a look. We're evaluating which proposals are going to go out there. But this was 3 workshops and deciding on the areas of interest related to opioid addiction treatment, pain management, and overdose reversal. So these are very, very important areas. I hope to see some great proposals from your school. So Dr. Chai just touched base on 2030. And so the way this happened, and this is where I want to give you some examples of some of these areas, that when we were getting ready for the next phase of the strategic plan, I can't believe it that I came in 2011, got a strategic plan together, 2014 to 2019. Now, this was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I said, we have to start thinking about our next strategic plan already. What are we going to do? And I felt we needed to be bolder and more innovative. And I also thought we need to look longer. 5 years goes along too quickly, and you really haven't gotten time to develop your thoughts and your vision of where you want to be. So why not 2030? So we set forth for our vision for 2030, and we said, let's work backwards. So think at 2030 of where you want to be, and then what do we need to do to get there? So we thought of what do we want to be in 2030, and maybe this is obvious, and maybe for you students you're thinking, well, aren't we there? And we're not there. So we want dental, oral, and craniofacial health and disease are understood in the context of the whole body. And in fact, it's not. And in fact, we really struggle with that communication, as I said in the beginning. By 2030, we have to be there. And so we set forth 5 different areas that we're interested in focusing on. And with those 5 different areas, so oral health, overall health, precision health, autotherapies, oral devices, and workforce diversity. And I'm going to give you some examples of what I mean by some of those and some of the research that's going on right now related to those. But the way we did this, I think, is very collaborative. We engaged the community. So the American Association of Dental Research helped us, and we launched it at an AADR meeting about a year ago, so it's now a year in. And we used something called an idea scale. If it's something you haven't used here as faculty, it's a great device, and we're continuing to use it on a lot of other calls where you go into the site and you can you can vote, you can decide on an area of research that you want to, that you think is important. And we really got feedback. I also did a webinar with the advocacy groups, so we got patient input, we got industry input, and I was really delighted in the balance of the input that we got. We then, based on the input, we hosted an autotherapy symposium in January. We also developed an initiative on oral devices that was presented and cleared by council, and you're going to hear more about this, and the proposals are going to be out. And then we have future plans related to many, many different areas here based on that idea scale and the thoughts that came back. I'm not going to read these to you, but just tell you that it's taken a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and I wanted 50% to be engaging the community. So I hope you're engaged. I hope you see from us, from NIDCR. You can go on, we have a new website. You can go on the NIDCR 2030, and students can participate. So for the fun of it, just click that open one day when you're bored with studying, or do it in class when you're bored with a teacher or something. Just click it on. It's kind of fun. Sorry. So I'm going to I'll give you some examples of these, and I hope they resonate with you. So the first one was oral health and overall health, that it will be fully integrated. And I'll give you an example related to some of the links and associations. So this particular example relates to rheumatoid arthritis, and it's always been sort of in that vague vacuum when you see your patients with rheumatoid arthritis. Is it associated with periodontal disease? Is it not? What's going on here? The point I'd like to mention, which is the bottom, is that it's not an association. It's not that one causes the other. But there are many situations where another pathology in the body is caused by the same mechanism in the oral cavity. So in this particular case, what they found is about 50% of the patients with rheumatoid arthritis have a specific bacteria. For those periodontists in the room, one of our favorite bacteria, Actinomycetes commicans, or AA, and that this bacteria, the toxins that it releases, affects the neutrophils. So you have these neutrophils that are then secreting these autoantibodies that are very destructive to the tissues. So in this case, there's a common mechanism, not that one causes the other. It's the mechanism. Let me give you another example, which is absolutely fascinating, because this is the reverse, where you end up with the same increase in specific cells that are toxic to the environment, these T helper 17 cells that are really effect on the immune cells. And this is I couldn't even figure out what this was an artist at the NIDCR that drew this. Can you figure out what that is? When it was in the Journal of Dental Research, at first I thought it was like a spinning wheel or a top wheel, but it's actually like a hammer, and that's a tooth down there. And these cells are exploding. But this is an example where in the skin, it's the microbiome that causes a disruption, and in the GI tract that causes the release of this cell that's damaging to the tissues. in terms of the oral mucosa and the gingira, it's actually the stresses and the strains that causes the release. So here's a situation where end product is the same, but different mechanisms to get there. Another one relates to precision health. And this is where precision prevention, treatment, and public health interventions will be available to all people. And I actually feel that as dentists, and I think you recognize this already as first year, second years, that we are forerunner in that area because every individual is treated individually. Every tooth is different. And so we already practice this to some degree, but we need to do even more than we do now. That's one aspect of it. And so one of these relates to all of us. If we don't have the data available in dentistry, and we can't talk to medicine, and medicine can't even talk to medicine with related to the electronic health record. So it's not just us, it's this whole integration. This is one of the major hurdles in this program of all of us, of getting the million people together and getting that information available. So I urge you, so far there's not an oral health question on the All of Us questionnaire in terms of taking the patient's history. We're trying to move that way. They're using an idea scale also, so you could go online in terms of research areas. And while I was doing this is in the Post, January 2018. So this is about a similar type of thing. And they were using a single breed of dog so that they can get a lot of information in terms of the negatives, positives, and they're tracking these dogs over time. And so they have 3,000 golden retrievers. In fact, that's all they wanted. They ended up with having more, so they had to shut it down. So these dogs love to be volunteers. But guess what? They included toothbrushing on that questionnaire, and we can't even do that for humans. So we all know I mean, I was amazed, and we all know we care more about our pets, right? We just, so. But just please be an advocate in practice or wherever you are. So I mentioned the pain research area already. This is one that's a huge collaboration across the campus. It's very exciting. The last month I've spent a lot on proposals in this area, specifically to temporomandibular joint, but also to the opioid crisis and dealing with this as in dentistry and medicine. And if you saw the American Dental Association huddle, they featured NIDCR, NIDA, that's drug abuse, and the American Dental Association that came to visit us. And the National Institute of Drug Abuse, Dr. Nora Volko, praised the dentists because of what they're doing and their initiatives being ahead of medicine in this area. So keep going, whether in practice or also in treating patients in your clinics here. But one of the areas that we funded is the 3,000 cohort of patients over time from before they got temporomandibular joint disorders to when they develop them. And interesting enough, men and women have acute temporomandibular joint disorders. When it goes to chronic, that's when you have this ratio of 8-to-1 female to male. What's going on here? It seems to be somewhat related to comorbidities. They have often about 70% high fibromyalgia, or a irritable bowel syndrome, migraine headache. So links together. In addition to the links together, there seems to be a hypersensitivity genes associated with this as well. Beyond the opioid trans NIH, we are funding, one that I'm really excited that we're funding relates to this de-implementation. So one of the areas, so we do the research, we demonstrate that this is of value, and yet the uptake by the dentists, by the physicians, by the nurses, by the dental hygienists, by various groups, physical therapists, it's not taken up. And so why? And so we have calls for proposals on implementation and how understanding why it's not happening. And now we had these call for proposals, and rather getting an implementation proposal, we got a de-implementation proposal. So with opioids, of how to get the practicing dentist to de-implement, and also discussing this with patients as well. We just launched this and we're very excited about it. Another area of funding, how am I doing on time? 5 minutes, I have to go fast. So another area that we're very excited about is the health disparities area. And we're in our second phase of funding in this area, looking at a lot of diverse areas. And with the 5 minutes, I will move forward because I think this is, so we're not just funding in the health disparities, but there are other types of disparities, and this is in autism. And this is a very successful, it was in a pilot project where they developed a butterfly wrap for individuals with autism, showing that it was published, that this was really successful, and we've now expanded it to a larger proposal. The third area is with autotherapies, and I think some people, I need to define this because some people are confused about autotherapy. They think it's a way of you're treating yourself. It's actually a way of taking advantage of your body's ability to repair and regenerate damaged tissues. Let me give you an example here that I'm excited about in terms of endodontics. So any of you that are going into endodontics, I think this is going to be one of the future areas that we're going to have a lot of innovation, maybe in the next 5 years. This was demonstrated in a animal model where they were able to stimulate the own pulp cells to regenerate the dentin. And so that's an example of autotherapy. Another area that I'm incredibly excited about relates to probiotics. And this is sort of an autotherapy as well. And I think we're finally going to have, so you go to the health food store. I bet you have a lot of friends. I bet you do. I sometimes do also. See something and say, that's intriguing. And then you try it. But we're going to have evidence-based probiotics. So this is an example where we know strep mutans is one of the active bacteria in caries, and this is a Streptococcus A12 strain that was isolated from a healthy individual that was able to counteract the effects of the mutants. So for individuals at risk, there's a potential to alter the bacteria in that area. There's also a potential to alter the biofilm. The other area that I discussed a little bit this morning relates to our Goal 4 and oral biodevices. This area here, and I'm hoping in your practices, or maybe even while you're in school, you'll be able to test some biodevices because the engineers and the dental faculty here are going to be testing them in the clinics. That's how I envision this happening within the next few years. So this is a wonderful area for local delivery, for sensing, for local as well as systemic. And we had a great conversation about this, and this just shows you some areas that are funded, but I'm going to move forward. This is another area in terms of targeting. You could imagine in practice, you give something locally, you give an antibiotic locally, you no longer have to give it systemically. Give it locally, it's released locally, correct the infection, no systemic effect. Workforce diversity is something that we're very interested in. We're doing some initiatives with the extramural community in developing a mentorship program, and you're going to see a proposal in that area. I'd be happy to talk about this or invite our folks out that focus in on training and career development. But one of the things I wanted to mention to the dental students is actually the bottom part of this. And so there are opportunities for summer to work at the NIDCR. There are also opportunities to take off a year from your dental school if your dean allows you to. And that really does work. So you may be thinking, I want to go into research, I don't want to go into research. It's a very competitive program, so you've had to have done some research already, and now you're trying to make a decision. We'd rather spend money investing in that 1 year of your career than 5 years or 7 years and then find out that you're really not interested in it. So it's some incredible opportunities. Happy to discuss more. These are the areas of our intramural program. They're synergistic with the extramural, so we don't do everything. But if you are interested in specific areas, it's a wonderful opportunity for the summer, and it's also a wonderful opportunity to take off a year if you have any excitement in research. I wanted to mention some of the products. And again, I'll go quickly here, just to let you know. So I don't know if many of you know that the Sonicare product was originally funded through a small business grant. There are a lot of other things that we're funding. The tools and technologies and area of funding, and some of the dental materials were first funded through the NIDCR before they're in your practice that you're using. One of gene therapy is one of the areas where we, NIDCR, is at the forefront in our intramural community, and this is one of a local delivery of an adenovirus, a stable adenovirus, that increases salivary flow. And we are in phases of clinical trials in our intramural program. Patients are getting positive results related to this. One of the ones I'm very excited about, and I'll go through this quickly because I think this may be in practice in about 5 years. And this was funded as a basic science project where they knocked out this gene in a mouse model and showed that when they knocked out the gene, the animals didn't heal. They recognized they could use that as an application for healing. They then developed a small molecule, less expensive, and now they put it on sutures for increased healing, but also for cleft lip, cleft palate. Very exciting. It's just gone through IND, IDE, and we're excited about that. The next slide is wonderful collaborations, opportunities, and you can read this. These slides are available for you. But I wanted to mention to the students, as in closing this, of the opportunities for continued lifelong learning. And one is with our practice-based research network. And this is where you, the dentist, say, you know, I really need to know something about my patient. I need to know whether what I'm using or the type of crown prep I'm using, what do other dentists do? And so these sometimes are surveys, sometimes they're questions, sometimes they're answers that you can address in a year. So one of the areas relates to the opioid prescribing practice. So to better inform you in practice, these are not long-term, it's very different than the long-term research projects. But it's an opportunity to engage with the NIDCR. So I hope this is something that you'll think about. You go on our website if you want any more information about this. Some of you that are first or second year, maybe in fourth year, you'll say, you know, I remember that practice-based network. I want to sign up for it. So I hope you remember that. And then in terms of who we are, as in closing, it's all about discovery, integration, and it's collaboration with everybody, and it's that back and forth seamless interaction. So I thank you so much for inviting me, and I look forward to wandering around and seeing some of your presentations as well. So thank you, and have a great day.